The Denver Broncos and head coach Sean Payton, they are building the foundation for this team around Bo Nix by locking in Garett Bolles to a 4-year contract extension. We'll tell you why this sheds light on the Broncos' philosophy, not just this year, but in years going forward here on today's episode. Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, where you know it is your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers and the first listeners out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in and making us part of your day every single day. We know you got you covered every single day, all year long, whether there's regular news or breaking news, as that will be the case here on today's episode of the show. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, and Broncos offensive tackle Garett Bolles will be staying in the Mile High City for the next 4 seasons. We'll talk about really how the Broncos foundation is really kind of formulating itself here with George Paton and Sean Payton, the Broncos brain trust, as they look to build the foundation here around Bo Nix. Garett Bolles is a big part of that, but obviously we'll kick things off by highlighting the big news of the day, the breaking news. Garett Bolles will be in Denver through at least 2028 after agreeing to terms on a 4-year extension. Break that down all on today's episode of the show here. So Broncos Country, let's get into it. Now, normally in the industry of sports media, everyone's trying to figure, okay, hey, what's going on? Is there going to be any movement here from the Broncos with 4 games left in the regular season? Are they going to make any more contract extensions because free agency is coming up and we don't know what the clear picture is going to be just yet for the Broncos as it pertains to next year's salary cap numbers? I know that number has not yet been officially released by the NFL. That was a subject of some of the December owners meetings that were ongoing last week, but no official number just yet. So the Broncos trying to get ahead of that here because Garett Bolles was set to become an unrestricted free agent. And there were a lot of questions as to whether or not he was going to return. Now, Garett made it very clear here this offseason, the first time he spoke to us during the OTA period, he expressed that the ball is in the Broncos' court. He wants to stay a Bronco for life. He would love to remain in Denver. I think there were a lot of questions, earlier in the offseason, though, about whether or not he would be back considering his cap hit for this final year of his deal and all the changes that Denver was making, moving on from Russell Wilson, moving on from Justin Simmons. We had all thought that, okay, hey, Garett Bolles will probably be next at this point, but what are the Broncos going to do at left tackle? That potential scenario never came to fruition, which is a good thing because I think in hindsight, as we look at where the Broncos stand right now at 8-5, they drafted a rookie quarterback that internally they believe is the franchise of their future. And I think another thing, too, that we're going to look at here, we'll also talk about on the show, is how the Broncos are building around Bo Nix and that philosophy here. But Garett Bolles getting a well-deserved contract extension here from the Broncos, 4 years, a deal that is worth $82 million, and you're going to get guarantees to report up to $41.9 million in total. I saw something out there as well that he can make up to $86 million, essentially. So it's 82 with the chance to go up to $86 million. I think that's probably based on incentives if the team makes the playoffs. If he, gets all pro bowl, some of those things get worked into the contract. We'll find out details around that later. But the Broncos locking up one of their important pieces on the offensive line here on Thursday, with Garett announcing the news himself on social media. But I think we have to take a look at this from the 30,000-foot view here for the Broncos and why this was the decision that the team had made here for Garett Bolles. We just talked about it on a couple episodes ago here on Locked On Broncos about how is the team going to approach this offseason in terms of free agency. Who would you re-sign? Sayre and I, we both agreed that, hey, you have to find a way to bring back Garett Bolles because he's playing at a high level right now. And I think the thing that stands out, look, 1 sack allowed on the season, but Garett has just been steady. I mean, since he suffered that major leg injury, he's come back with a little bit of a vengeance, and he's played terrifically well here for the Broncos at left tackle. You look at 2 weeks in a row where you're facing Max Crosby one week, you're facing Myles Garrett the next week, and those guys don't get a single sack. It's a product of, I think, what Garett has done, how well the offensive line has done in pass protection here, but it also sheds a little bit of light as to the fact that the Broncos really believe in the trenches. That's something that Sean Payton and George Paton have said from the onset, is that this game and in this league, games are won and lost inside the trenches, that whether it be on the offensive side of the ball, whether that be on the defensive side of the ball. The Broncos have revamped both of those areas in the last year and a half here, and now you're seeing it really kind of pay dividends. So now, instead of going into 2025 free agency saying, hey, like, Garett wants to stay a Bronco, but now he's going to get interest from some other teams that are going to be in need, because it's hard to come across tackles in the NFL. Good ones don't normally hit the free agency market. And for the Broncos, that's also proven to be true because they did not let Garett hit free agency here. And I think we even had a couple of ideas thrown around that, okay, hey, like if the Broncos do not bring Garett back, what does that look like? Do they ask Mike McGlinchey to switch from right tackle to left? And do they put Alex Palczewski at right tackle? To me, it didn't seem like a gamble that I feel like the Broncos or Sean Payton or George Paton would want to make there. We even threw out the hypothetical, if the Broncos were to draft an offensive tackle in round 1, would you really want Bo Nix, your rookie quarterback, who the team internally believes, as I mentioned, is the franchise guy for them? Do you want a second-year quarterback having a rookie left tackle in today's age of pass rushers and how it is? It's a hard risk to take. And certainly I think you can make the financial argument for it, but right now the Broncos don't seem to care about that. They're finding ways to navigate and maneuver here and really build this offense in the trenches. And I think the one thing that stands out too about the offensive line, now with Garett Bolles' contract extension, you've got obviously Garett, you've got Ben Powers, you've got Quinn Miners and Mike McGlinchey all locked in here on the offensive line through 2025 and through 2026. Essentially, the only player who's not locked in past this year, past 2025, is Luke Wattenberg, who's the starting center right now. Obviously, his rookie deal will be coming up at some point as well. So Denver is really investing in, hey, our two guards and our two, on the left side, our two guards on the right side are important. Obviously, the center position is very important here. I'm very curious to see how the offense continues to grow here. Obviously, with Zach Strief remaining on as the offensive line coach right now, Denver's in a good position with their personnel, and I think that they like the backups that they have behind them with Alex Forsythe at center, Alex Palczewski as an offensive tackle backup, and they like the developmental traits of undrafted rookie free agent Frank Crum. They still have Cam Fleming right now in the practice squad. They have Matt Parrott on the active roster, and Matt Parrott has done a very solid job this season. He's been the Broncos' jumbo offensive tackle. So really part of it is, hey, we're going to protect our quarterback. The internal belief is we have a quarterback who protects the football, doesn't take sacks, gets rid of it, but we also have an offensive line that can do a really good job of protecting him. This is a great move here for the Broncos to help solidify the foundation of what is going to be the future of this team around Bo Nix, and it starts with protecting your quarterbacks. And we understand with the ebb and flow and the changes of today's game, you're going to have other needs that will pop up, and you may have to ignore some things just because you can't financially afford, I think, to pay for every need that you have. But that's where you really invest in your development on the back end, from your practice squad, from players who aren't necessarily who are on the active roster but don't get the chance to be activated or active on Sunday. Player development has been a big thing here for George Paton, for Sean Payton, and now you have your starters locked in for a good portion of the next handful of years. And then after that, it's like, hey, if we have to make a decision to move on, are the guys that we have behind them, have they developed enough to be able to thrust them into that role? I think that's the idea and the thinking here for the Broncos as they move forward here. But Broncos Country, we want to know what you think here on today's bonus breaking news episode. Locked On Broncos, Garett Bolles locked into a 4-year contract extension, $82 million, $41.9 million in guarantees. Was this the right move for the Broncos? Make sure you let us know on Locked On Broncos. One thing we are going to discuss here on today's bonus episode of the show is how the vision for building this team under George Paton and Sean Payton is starting to formulate itself, and what can we expect next as we talk about team building. Even though there's 4 weeks left in the season here, if they're making this move here with Garett Bolles, could Courtland Sutton be next? We'll break that down and much more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by friends over there at the Game Time app. And look, if you want to go check out this weekend's game where the Denver Broncos are going to host the Indianapolis Colts, Game Time is the place to be, and you can get the best seats available with their new feature called Game Time Picks. And Game Time Picks that filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals that are going on right now with great seats. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It finds the best seat, the best value, the best deal, and it delivers it directly to you where you can go see your favorite events, whether it's a sporting event, comedy, theater, music, and more. They have everything inside of the Game Time app. Now, while I obviously love the Game Time Picks feature, I also love their seat views where I can actually see based on where the seat is at that I'm going to, whether it's the Broncos game, whether it's to a Metallica concert this summer, I can see exactly what my vantage point of the experience is going to be like inside of the app. That's with the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. It's also time to tell you this show is also brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel. And as you all know, FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they want you to get ready to tackle Week 15 of the NFL season all inside of their app, especially for new customers. Because if you're a brand new customer right now, you can start the season with a big return. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bet. So if you're watching the Broncos game against the Colts this week and there's a hunch developing, the Broncos have some rhythm going, you can go in and live bet. Or if you want to place a bet on the Broncos on the money line, or you want to bet on them to cover the spread against the Colts, certainly you can do that all inside the app, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So sign up as a new customer here today, place a $5 bet, and if it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, all on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. So make sure you check it out today, FanDuel.com. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. As we continue on today's breaking news bonus episode of Locked On Broncos, we're going to highlight a little bit about the foundation and the vision that George Paton and Sean Payton have kind of outlined here with building this team. Also looking at a couple of moves that the team could make here next, maybe even in season, maybe right after the season. We're going to have our eyes on that. Just want to say thanks once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos country, everyone who makes us your first listen. Thank you so much. We appreciate you here in Broncos country. All right, so now with Garett Bolles locked in, we talked about it in the previous segment. The entire offensive line is locked in through 2025, minus the exception there of Luke Wattenberg, whose rookie deal will be expiring here very shortly. So with that said, what does this tell us about how George Paton and Sean Payton are trying to build this team? Okay, well, they've had every opportunity, right, to make some moves. They traded away Jerry Jeudy in the offseason before they had Bo Nix, but they go out, they draft a quarterback that they believe can be the guy for them, right? Bo Nix has certainly grown. He's elevated this team. He's elevated the offense in a lot of different ways, and this team and this locker room have really rallied behind him. I see it every day when I'm there. I see the way that these guys talk about him in the locker room to us. They're big believers here, just like I think a lot of people in Broncos country are here. But for the most part as well, it's like, okay, how is this roster, how is this offense starting to shape out in the vision of Sean Payton and George Paton? They're very much aligned on a lot of the things that we talk about here in terms of we need stability. We need a foundation. And I think that's the number one word we're going to talk about is Sean Payton wants to build a foundation for this team. And it starts in the trenches on offense. It starts in the trenches on defense. So for the offense, when you have a rookie quarterback, you have to do whatever you can to protect him and give him opportunities to stay upright so he can produce and continue to showcase whether or not he is or isn't the guy for you. And all signs point to the fact that he is the guy right now. But what about the pieces around, right? Offensive line is super important, but what about the skilled players? Courtland Sutton right now, obviously in the offseason, they found a way to bump up his incentives this season. And if the Broncos make the playoffs, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he gets around $500K. We'll have to take a look at that just for confirmation. Someone bring it up in the comments or also on social media. But they wanted to keep Courtland Sutton in here. And I had a chance last week when I was hosting KOA Sports with Ryan Edwards and Dave Logan. We had a chance to talk with Ian Rappaport. And I asked Ian Rappaport about whether or not the Broncos, is there interest in them potentially coming to terms on an extension with Courtland Sutton? He said the interest between the two parties would seem mutual because the Broncos over the last 3 years have had a handful of teams call and try to trade for Courtland Sutton and some aggressive offers in which the Broncos have said, hey, we're not looking to part ways with Courtland. Sean Payton believes in his size, his skill set, and as we've seen, he's approaching a potential career-high year here with just 4 games remaining on the season, 5 touchdowns on the year. He and Bo Nix's connection have been special. So with that, you have a guy in Courtland Sutton who's locked in. You draft a couple of rookies. You draft Troy Franklin, who's got legit speed. You draft Marvin Mims last year at the back end of round 2 because he's got legit speed, weaponized threat status to him. And then you have little Jordan Humphrey in as a veteran guy who Sean Payton trusts, is like, hey, this is a guy who can block well in the perimeter for me. He does the little things well. There's obviously areas he can continue to grow and improve. But then you also have a rookie in Devon Vele who has certainly accelerated in his development here with the Broncos as the number 2 receiver, big body guy, good catch radius, has the ability to catch in traffic. It's like, all right, now you got a rookie quarterback. You have a locked in offensive line. You have a veteran wide receiver who at this point, I think we can also talk about the fact that for Courtland, probably an extension will be coming his way here either this season or in the offseason. Next year will be the final year of his deal. So it could even go into that. But Courtland is a guy I think the Broncos want to tie in for a while. Okay, so now you got the veteran guy there as your wide receiver 1. You got Marvin Mims, who has come on as of late. You've got Troy Franklin, who is certainly has traits to be very special, and he's continuing to get more comfortable within the system, and he's starting to do a little bit more. You know, we want to see the deep shot be connected upon here at some point, but they're going to work him a little bit in the short to intermediate game because of his speed, his yard after the catch ability there, and then you have Devon Vele, who's become a little bit of a reliable possession, move the chains type of guy for you, and then you got some developmental guys like A.T. Perry on the back end. So realistically, the Broncos' philosophy is to draft players and to develop them, or you can identify players that maybe teams misplaced or like mismanaged the situation or environment for them wasn't right. I look at A.T. Perry as one of those guys that, hey, he wasn't being used the right way in New Orleans. And certainly Cody Roark, who's on staff here, understands and knows a little bit about him. Pete Carmichael, who's on Payton's staff, knows a little bit about A.T. Perry. So it's like, hey, we can find a way to make this guy into something that we believe can impact here. So now I think this changes the Broncos' plans of, okay, now you're just going to roll with the young wide receivers. You're going to lock in your veteran guy. You may add 1 or 2 guys. It's certainly a possibility here. You may add a playmaker. You may try to make a push in free agency for a guy that's going to be available. But primarily, I think the focus here now shifts to tight end for the Broncos and to running back here. Javonte Williams' contract is going to expire after this season. You're going to have Jaleel McLaughlin. You still have Audric Estime. You have Tyler Bidet, and you also have Blake Watson, who are still on your roster. So are you building and going forward with some of these younger guys? Or are we going to look to add pieces in free agency or the NFL draft? The tight end position, certainly very interesting as well. Do you draft a guy? Is there a free agent in particular that would come in and add a boost that the Broncos don't currently have? Or are you going to stay the course with developing a guy like Lucas Kroll? You have Donald Parham Jr. in the practice squad. Right now, I think the vision is very clear here for this Broncos team. Draft, develop, and accelerate it as much as you can. The Broncos, they're maximizing the window they have. They have a quarterback on a rookie contract, an offensive line that's got guys locked up a little bit. They're looking to go and make a run here. And if you're Broncos country, these next 4 games are going to be crucial for the team. But with that said, Broncos country, that'll wrap up today's bonus episode breaking news show here on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. For all you everydayers, make sure you check out the crossover episode Sayre Bedinger did with Locked On Colts. Tomorrow's episode of the show, one thing we're going to dive deeper into is key matchups. Matchups that we have our eyes on that are going to define the outcome of the game, bold predictions, and much more. Make sure you share yours here. Locked On Broncos, wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.